We are live. Hello, everyone. Please share the page. Hello, everyone. Please share this page, Hurt for the Hurting. Another live interview here. This is a special topic today, the church and technology, during COVID-19. I found the very best in the areas of video, in the areas of website, area of social media management, live streaming, and then giving, your electronic giving platform that I could come up with. Certainly, if you have others, you can voice those on your special platform. We're starting off with one that is not just a business partner, but he's a friend, a brother beloved. He's worked with the Hurt Foundation, the church, our church, Mount Sinai, where we are privileged to serve as senior pastor and teacher, and then also with the Hurt for the Hurting Ministries, every component and facet of which we are tied in. He has worked with us. He is also a native of the best city ever made, city of Detroit. What up, dope?
Yeah.
For all those that are out there. But we want you to take a moment, share the stream out there. We're going to get a chance to get to know him, get to know his company, and find out how in the future days he is here to partner with churches. No matter your size or your budget, he wants to work with you to ensure that as we are presenting the gospel message out there, that we are presenting it with excellency. We're presenting it with a sense of professionalism, and we're grateful and thankful for him once again coming and joining with us. Let me begin by saying to you, Brother Ed, thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your friendship. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, In the midst of all the craziness, we are definitely blessed.
Praise God. Tell us a little bit about your background as it relates to what you do now and how the Lord led you to drill in and focus in on churches.
Well, like you said, Pastor, I'm originally from the lovely city of Detroit, Michigan. I moved to California when I was 18. I got into filmmaking at the age of 13. And I knew at that young age that that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So as soon as I graduated from high school, I moved to Hollywood. I ended up working for the studios for 25 years, doing lighting and lighting design. Worked on a lot of big projects with a lot of known people, and it really gave me the experience to interact at all levels, from low budget student film level all the way up to Steven Spielberg, $100 million projects. I've always been in church all my life, went to private school in Detroit, the lovely St. Martin de Porres High School. And what I realized in all coming up through churches is that while I was working in Hollywood and working on all these amazing products, when it came to church videos and church productions, they seemed to be on the low end side. And that always bothered me. So in 2000, I believe it was 14, I decided to create a company. I was doing a lot of nonprofit work at the time. And I decided to create a company that was specifically gauged to creating high quality products for churches. And that's where Church Visions was born.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing it. Thanks so much for sharing that. Tell us a little bit about the services that you all offer, how that's relevant to the church. You can go from A to Z as it relates to that. Then I'll take a moment to testify on your work as it relates to personal experience.
Well, we do a lot. One of our major things or most popular things is we create content for your church. So for churches. So we'll do video announcements. A lot of times there are some churches that, still read the announcements to get the information out to the congregation while they're there. We create a way that makes it more interesting, where we'll have a host from your church, or voiceover, or moving graphics, and we create a video version of the upcoming events that are happening at your church. We also do a thing called sermon highlights, where we'll take a pastor's sermon, 45, 50 minutes, and condense it down to a real hot, fast-paced 2 minutes. And we call that sermon highlights. And that's really good to put on social media. We even do 1-minute versions for Instagram. And that allows people to get engaged and get pieces of the message, but at the same time, not overflood them all at once. And they'll have the opportunity to hear different pieces and go, oh, okay, I want to go back and listen to the whole message when I can. We also do promos for church events. So if you have a men's conference happening or something like that, we create that. In this space with COVID-19, we are working with some churches where we're literally filming an entire service from scratch with praise and worship and message and different things, and packaging and putting that together weekly so that churches can still have engagement with their congregation.
Well, let's go back for a second, then press forward. Let's go back and talk about some of the things that you noticed as relates to poor quality before you started your business that drive you to the point where you wanted to do this and be assistance to the body of Christ. What were some of the things that stood out to you that was not of good quality? Don't worry, nobody's listening. It's just me and you.
Yeah, right. Well, I think one of the first things with video production, unlike a lot of the volunteer positions in ministry, you have ushers and the choir and just so many. Video production is a skilled, it requires a high skill set, whether it be being a camera person or sound or lighting. And what we found is that there were a lot of volunteers who might have had a camcorder at home, or in these days an iPhone or Android, and felt like, okay, I'm a videographer, I can do it. And we would find bad sound using, say, like the camera mic, shakiness, not really understanding handheld operation as far as a camera operator, bad lighting, which is the biggest thing, because lighting is a huge skill. There's an actual science to it. It's not just turning on a light and thinking that works. There is a true science with lighting and how lighting bounces off of surfaces and skin tones and all these things. So we found a lot of that happening, and we wanted to bring Hollywood to the church without the prices or the costs that it does. So we basically reverse engineered how things are done visually and then brought it to the church.
Well, talk to us about the type of investment a church would have to make to get that type of thing done, be it with you as an outsource or be it with you as a consultant who would walk one through the process to do this as from a liberty standpoint. So you can either give them the fish or you can teach them how to fish.
Yeah. Basically, one of the first things that we always recommend with a church that is coming into this from the beginning is to set yourself up and create a promo video. We call it a promo video, a welcome video for your church. And we come out and we'll spend a service with you, or even a couple services with you, and film your service, film the different areas of your ministry. If you have a children's ministry or different annexes or whatever, or if it's just the one room, we'll film different things. And this gives you an opportunity to put this on your website, put this on social media to highlight how your ministry goes. Then we want to encourage consistent engagement. The church going people, they want something from your ministry as much as possible, daily, if possible. So that's where we help you create content, whether it be a sermon highlight or something that you at least give them on a daily or weekly basis to keep them engaged with your ministry. And that can be done in a variety of ways, again, through church announcements, video announcements, sermon highlights. And then with some clients, we've actually created a spiritual web series where we create different stories and help them, highlight their members of the congregation through the web series.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, everyone has a testimony, and we should, as followers of Christ, we should have, as we receive the good news from the Bible, we should also have good news to tell. And we all have our ebbs and flows in life. So you may be in a down time, but if you heard a testimony from someone else that's going through something that you're going through similar, that can bring you up. And so we worked with one church, and we created a series called Transform. And it was these small little 15-minute stories of individuals, ordinary people who have overcome extraordinary obstacles, whether overcoming drug addiction or domestic violence or bullying and different things. And we did testimonies from people who were teenagers all the way up to seniors. And that series really helps individuals who are, again, trying to not feel like they're alone in their situation, and they see that there's someone else that may be going through something, but they did overcome it.
Oh, wow. And you said, what church was this?
That was the Secret Place in Pasadena. Okay. And it actually was an award-winning documentary series. We did 4 installments, which were about 12 episodes. And it won, best documentary and best writing, best direction in a Christian Film Festival a year and a half ago. So we're real proud. And we were just about to start production on the next series 2 weeks before they shut everything down in March. So.
Oh, COVID,
yeah.
Right. What's some other things that you've done with churches in the past that stands out to you as unique?
What's interesting is one church, Clarence E. McClendon, we Church of the Harvest, we created a short film called The Force of Hope. And we did that back, that was back in 2004, I believe. But we actually took the whole theme of the Matrix and put a Christian twist on it. And it ended up being like an outreach piece for the ministry, and where they, used the funds to, help with outreach. And it really got popular overseas in Europe and in Africa. But that was a fun opportunity to just put something together. We had the whole visual effects things and people flying around and the whole Morpheus thing. And that was cool. So that was, and we actually worked with a church in Hawthorne, California, where we called Revelation, where we filmed a story, but it interconnected with a live play. So you would come to the church, to the performance, to the play, and they would do a scene on the stage, then the lights would dim, and the big screens would come on, and it would be a continuation of that story cinematically, and it would come back to the play, and it would go back and forth. And that was really a fun, challenging, but fun project that we did a couple of years ago.
Well, talk to us about COVID-19. Let's start with the bad. What projects did you have set up? You talked about one already. What projects did you have set up? How did that shift things that you heard from churches as it relates to the panic button? And then we'll progress into how things from a positive side have been able to assist churches through COVID-19. But take us into the drama of COVID-19 from your professional standpoint.
Well, it like everyone can attest to, it hit out of nowhere. We were hearing about the coronavirus back in, from China back in the end of December and January. We're like, oh, okay, that's over there. And then like just a sucker punch from behind, it hit us. And like I mentioned earlier, we were already in pre-production to shoot more of the Transform series. And then we had a number of conferences. We do a lot of conference filming, youth conferences, men's conferences, women's conferences, marriages conference. And the spring, is when a lot of those conferences happen. And we were on target to film 4 conferences that we had scheduled over the course of about 5 weeks. And when COVID hit, all that went away. And we were actually about a week and a half from a big youth conference in Big Bear, California, with over 250 youth. We've been filming that for 5 years. And it's one of our favorite conferences because they, go out there, Big Bear, and they do all the paintballing and the zip lining and everything, riding horses. And, we were really looking forward to putting that together. And then, boom, that shut down. There's a big conference that we do in Jacksonville, Florida. And that's supposed to would have happened in about a couple of weeks, week-long conference, and canceled. And so we, also we do a lot of, video announcements. And so we had actually produced a video announcement for a church, and it was advertising all these things that were coming up, and boom, the church had shut down. And so the events that they were advertising weren't happening. And then they didn't have a need to show the video announcement because they weren't going to be open. So it was crazy. But about just before they shut everything down is when we got a call, and one of our clients that we normally do, conferences for and sermon highlights, they said, "You are going to be our 6th man because we don't have live streaming. We don't live stream. We're not connected for that. We need you to produce our service from scratch and get it out to the world every week. Can you and your team do that?" And it's a big process. It takes about 4 of us to do it, but we did, and it's their giving is equal to what they were having when people were coming into the sanctuary, because they're having a further reach, and they're able to do things more dynamically because of the editing and the technology. So that was one of the good things. And we have a shoot Saturday with Atherton Baptist Church. They're in Hawthorne, and they came to us and they are live streaming, but they're like, we need content to go in between the singing and the preaching. We just don't want it to be a couple songs sung and then the sermon, and then that's it. So we're producing a series of 10 like little mini short little movie vignettes that they can play 1 or 2 every service and just kind of mix it up a bit. So we've been able to do things like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Tell us about some of the other things that you hear and calls you've gotten since COVID-19 broken down. And what do you see out there that you haven't got the call for, that you say, hey, we're here and I see this as a need? You may not know we were able to assist you with that.
Well, one thing, I guess it wasn't surprising, but it was interesting how many churches had no technical setup in regards to creating multimedia. They might have had a website, maybe on Facebook, but that was it. No live streaming capabilities, no production of video content, just basically relying on the congregants to come to service every week, and that was it. On the Facebook page, it may have had some inspirational texts and Bible verses on a graphic or whatnot, but that was it. And so what we're finding now, the biggest requests that we're getting is content. And one of the other things that that is ramped up is transcription. We have the ability to transcribe your sermon's message, and then that can be turned into ebooks or study guides or even a full-on paperback. Because we're finding now with a lot of people at home, they want to just sit and read. They want to read inspirational materials. So we're working on a devotional right now with a client, a 365-day devotional, where we're taking old videos that they recorded every day. They did a little 15-minute snippet every day on video, and we're transcribing those and creating a nice yearly devotional. So we found that to be an interesting request is the transcription. And again, like I mentioned earlier, just creating content. We've been doing opens and closes for churches that do have live streaming, but they just need more. They wanted to feel more like a broadcast, a television broadcast. You want people, the feel of a church service, but they wanted like a little commercial segment.
Mm-hmm.
And so we produced like little spots about giving or fellowshipping online and things like that. So we found that to really go up high.
Oh, wow. That is cool. Tell us a little bit about let's go back to the transcribe. What does that consist of as relates to time frame, how people can reach you to get that done? Jordan, you can go ahead and put that information up there as it relates to the website, which is churchvisions.com, churchvisions.com. But tell us a little bit more, Mr. Ed, about how we can how that works, because I know a few people that will be interested in that and that are themselves. How would that work? What's the turnover from that? And if you feel comfortable, even what the cost or something like that would be.
Sure, definitely. So basically, we'll take your, say 45 to 50 minutes sermon and transcribe it. So if you do it on Sunday, we'll have it turned around for you by the following Sunday. And so we charge $100 per sermon. We also can take your Zoom calls. There are a lot of people doing Zoom calls, and either through Bible study or different forms like that, or just topical discussions. So we can transcribe the Zoom calls. I don't have the rate per audio minute for that, but definitely you can come to the website and there's an area there where you can put your information and we'll contact you. But basically, we have a 1 week turnaround and we get it right back to you in full document form. And if you feel like you want to develop, say, a book series or whatnot, then we can help with that using the different online platforms like CreateSpace to do that.
Wow, that's amazing. Is there anything else that you want to plug? Anything else where people can find you? Tell us the telephone number they could dial, email address that they can email to. I know it's all on your website, but some people may be ready right now, and Jordan will help with that. I see that Chase has made it on. God bless you, brother. And we're wrapping up here, and we'll soon get into that. But Ed, tell us where we could find you.
Yeah, so again, you can find us on the website, churchvisions.com. You can email us at info@churchvisions.com or give us a call at 949-478-3264. And someone will talk with you and let them know what your interests are in services. I know there may be some of you out there that may need information on how to set up live streaming. And we do have some links on our website on how to do that, and some recommendations on some startup equipment that can be very affordable for you. All of it can be gotten on Amazon.com, so it can get to you quick, and we can consult or even install and help you get that going.
Great, Ed. I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much for taking the time. If you want to hang out, we'll do some crosstalk later. We have a platform, one that I've been researching platforms for an extended amount of time and have not found one to be as efficient and effective and done in the spirit of excellency as the one that here. As I told him, we're not ready to transfer them yet as a church because we're fresh to our new one, but we are using it for the hurting, and he'll talk a little bit more for the churches out there that's with it. And Ed, I want you to meet Chase. Chase, I want you to meet Ed. Both of you similar company. things, ministering to the body of Christ. And certainly after this, I'll exchange both of y'all informations for you can get on to that. Ed, appreciate you greatly, man. Love you much, brother. We're going to work on so many other things that we got to get back to. But thanks so much. All right. Chase.
How's it going, man?
My man? You look smooth, brother. You all right?
I'm doing just fine. I'm joining you here from beautiful and warm Western Pennsylvania here today. So happy to be here.
Yeah, it looks like it's very sunny out there and active. Happy to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the company. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into the company, and you use that as a bridge and a transition to tell us about the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Vision 2 now for going on 3 years. And prior to Vision 2, really had not very much experience working with churches. I actually spent about 10 years as an independent contractor in the energy industry. So, worked my way up through the ranks, worked my rear end off, and had a lot of success there in that career. But it was starting to get to a point where, I was working so hard and, accomplishing a bunch of stuff, but that passion just, it wasn't there. And I was starting to think about, why am I even doing this? What impact is this work that I'm doing having on, the greater good? You start to have one of those, I don't know if it's a midlife crisis or just one of those coming to Jesus moments where I realize I've got one life to live and I want to spend that life doing what I can to help my fellow humans out there. So after about 10 years, I, left my job. Wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, but I knew something was going to call to me. So after some time, I had a close friend introduce me to Seacoast Church in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, where I got to know a lot of great guys. Got involved with the church there a little bit. And, prior to that, as a teenager, had kind of a bad experience with the church and saw, what internal turmoil at a church can do, and, split up my hometown and just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. But, after I was reintroduced to Seacoast, I started to see what good could be done out there and what community could really do, and what the church, what power the church had to help improve people's lives. So, one thing led to another. An opportunity here at Vision 2 came about and opened up, and jumped right on it, and haven't looked back since.
Man, praise God for your testimony, your journey. Certainly it shows that all things do work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to its purpose. Tell us a little bit about Vision 2, just from a general perspective, what you all do, and then I'll get into some specifics.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the opportunity here. I always feel like the best way to talk about your company and tell people about your company is to, tell them how it got started and why we even exist in the first place. Because I think that adds a lot of context to our mission, why we built our product the way that we did, and what good it can do for all the churches out there. So, we've been helping churches now for about 9 years, and we all started out of Saddleback Church, Rick Warren's Saddleback. And at that time, Saddleback was, they're a very large, prominent church, very heavy attendance growth, forward-thinking church out there. But about 9 years ago, they were experiencing this phase of really rapid but healthy attendance growth. So had a lot of new faces coming in, a lot of new members, but what they found was people kept coming back. So they took it upon themselves to kind of take a deep dive into what the church was doing in each operational area and figure out where they could improve and, what they were doing really well. So they found out some really interesting things over the course of several months where they were doing this self-evaluation. And they found that anytime that they were able to interact with people face to face, which is very challenging these days, but, talking about the Sunday service, small groups, Bible study classes, events, volunteer opportunities, anytime the church was able to interact with members or non-members face to face, people could really get a sense of what Saddleback was all about and what membership could be like, and what impact the church has made in the community, both locally and globally. They could get to know the culture of Saddleback really well. So all things were just kind of clicking for Saddleback as far as their in-person and on-site experience. So that was working really well for them. And then they started to think about, okay, how are all these new people finding out about us to begin with? How are they making that decision to come join us for the first time? So they looked at their website, and we all know that church websites are paramount, especially these days, as far as creating a brand for your church. I hate to use that word, but it is true.
Right.
Every church is different and unique, and it's very easy to get lost in the shuffle. So you've got to put that best foot forward to give people an idea of what your church is all about. But Saddleback looked at their website, and they saw that they had a very interactive website. They did some research and found that before somebody visited their church for the first time, they were actually visiting Saddleback's website 28 times. So people were doing a lot of window shopping and trying to make that prayerful decision on how they were going to spend their time and come to visit Saddleback. So the in-person experience, knocking out of the park. The website experience, knocking it out of the park, doing a great job. And then they started to think about, what are we doing with these people once they become members and once we're engaged with them? How are we building these relationships with folks over time? So, we all know that part of that is giving back. You give back to your church, you give back to God, and that's part of being a good Christian. So, the in-person giving experience has been the same for the last 2,000 years. You're giving in worship as a group, when you're in the moment, and you give back in the plates. But about 9 years ago, online giving started to become much more relevant and really necessary, just because folks stopped carrying cash and check. So Saddleback started to look at their online giving experience, and they really spent a lot of time evaluating everything that was on the market at the time. What they found was every single online giving provider was basically the same thing. So say, for example, we're going to go to make a donation to the church. We go to the church's website, which we know and we trust, and we find the give button, and we go to click that give button, and immediately the first thing that happens is, as a giver, I'm taken away from that church website that I know and I trust and I'm familiar with, and I get redirected to an unfamiliar third-party vendor website that doesn't look anything like the church. It's very static and transactional. A lot of times there's a long form there and a drop-down menu that really doesn't do anything to talk about why I should be giving or what the impact of my gift is going to have. So that was just a major disconnect for Saddleback, and they saw that just wasn't going to cut it for them. They worked so hard, spending so much time and energy and money creating that best experience that they possibly can for folks, and that disconnect with the online giving piece just wasn't going to cut it. So basically, the long and the short of it was that they saw a need there. They approached our founder, Carl Tierney, who just kind of had the perfect mix of experience with technology and finance, and had a lot of great experience working with World Vision. So he built a platform for Saddleback that is purpose-built for the church to help them treat their online givers in the same types of ways that they would want to treat them in person. So
tell us a little bit about, the fee structure. What's unique about your platform compared to others that are out there? And even as I see Pro Media Fire and Clint Rogers making it into this stream, how people, as they build their website, can marry your organization together with what you're doing, what you all do, excuse me.
Yeah, so those are great questions. And, like I mentioned, we were built out of Saddleback. So we built our platform to be the most robust, comprehensive, industrial strength giving platform out there, and we accomplished that. But in the meantime, we wanted to make sure that the tools that we offer, which are, in the church world, they're revolutionary. We wanted to make sure that those were accessible to not just the saddlebacks out there that have the big budgets, but a church of any size, because we've seen the impact and what good work that the technology that we employ can do for a church. We wanted to make sure that it was accessible. So Vision 2 has no subscription fees, no annual fees. There's basically zero overhead to use our platform. And the way that we are able to get away with that is because we're not just the software, but we've also built our very own payment processing. So we operate on a transaction basis. So we are, internally incentivized and naturally incentivized to help your church be as successful as possible, because that's the only way that our company is successful, is if we're helping you raise more money.
Oh, wow, that's great. Tell us more about how you interface with the website and try to make that a unique experience for those that come to give.
Yeah, so I always like to kind of get back to the Amazon experience, and I think we've all at this point purchased something on Amazon. And I remember a couple of days ago, you and I were talking through the scenario of buying a pair of jeans on Amazon. You go to Amazon and you type in the word jeans and you get 50,000 different varieties of jeans that you can buy, which is incredible. But, the way that you, as a consumer, end up making a choice on which jeans you purchase is you're scrolling down through the options, you're looking at the pictures, you're reading the descriptions about the jeans. Are these boot cut? Are they relaxed fit? Are they stretch jeans, skinny jeans? What are these things? So you end up using all that content, the information, to make your decision on which jeans you want to buy. So the way that relates to church giving is, if you walk down Main Street in any town, you're going to pass 10 different churches. Every church has a general ministry fund. Every church has a benevolence fund. Most churches have a ministry fund. But if you would actually stop in and talk to the pastor of each one of those churches, you're going to get a different story on what those things are at that particular church. So what Vision 2 does, instead of it being a drop-down menu where somebody makes a kind of a vague decision on how they're prayerfully using their sacrificial gift, people actually have the content and the context to make a decision on, how they want to support the church and what the impact of that gift is going to have. So it becomes a much more inspirational and educational and encouraging experience versus a transaction like you're paying a bill. So real quick, getting back to that Amazon experience, you buy the jeans and you're happy with them, and a couple weeks later you decide that you need to buy something else. And without you lifting a finger, Amazon starts to suggest, oh, here's a shirt, here's a pair of shoes, here's a belt or something that you might be interested in based on those jeans that you bought the last time. And that's personalization. The way that relates to church giving is that, every member in your church is unique. They're on a different path. They're on a different place in the path in their journey. And, that gift that they just made means something different to each person. So, the quick and dirty example of how we can personalize that experience even further is, we've got all this data on every transaction because we're the software and we're the processor, that we can actually give your church leadership the ability to really, slice and dice and segment the different characteristics of your giver, so that, as people are giving, you can actually match that up against, some type of triggered behavior. So if it's the first time somebody gives online to your church, that's a great time to send them a special message. Thank you so much for joining us for the first time. We're so happy to have you here at our church. Versus if somebody's been tithing for 10 years, it might be a little bit more of a, thank you for your commitment. We're so happy to have you as a long-term member, so on and so forth. So, the limits really there really is no limits when it comes to how you can communicate with your givers as it relates to, each individual person.
Wow, that's major. We're here at the Hurt for the Hurting platform. We're talking about church and technology, especially during this pandemic. We have Chase on from Vision 2 Systems. You see the website there. He is stressing to us that this is not just a platform, the exchange, that there's built-in partnership, but there'll be also a processing fee. So some companies, they outsource that. They are the one doing it. That allows them the financial flexibility as an organization. And then it also allows them to be a partner with you because your success is contingent on their success. Think of the lawyer that doesn't get anything if he loses the case, opposed to the one that's just on a retainer. The latter is going to be a little bit more lax because he's getting his dollars beside the point. And even though we're talking about church and ministry, we have to be realistic that it's a business. And those that are listening here, that have not invested in your budget during this time where digital discipleship is our only choice, these companies are so powerful and relevant. I'm going to bring in to this conversation a outstanding gentleman that is a part of an amazing organization that our church, both our church and Hurt for the Hurting, is a part of. And he's going to tell us a little bit about Pro Media Fire and a little bit about himself, and we're grateful to have him with us. Clint, you get a little background there. There may be something on in the background there, but the floor is yours.
Is there a little bit of feedback? Is that coming through all right?
I think you're good now. Whatever you just did, I think
okay. Excellent. I have to say, Pastor George, it's an honor to be here with you, with everyone that's on as well. We just love Hurt for the Hurting. We're honored to partner with you, as well as loved hearing just Vision 2, the systems and what you're doing, and just really the heart, as we've seen, that heart that once again, able to take it off the processing and really just help sow into churches and help them in the area of digital and giving. Just love what you're doing. Our passion over at Pro Media Fire and Pro Web Fire, as you know, Pastor George, really is helping churches speak the language of culture and reach people in the digital landscape. It's interesting because our heart came out of initially, I know with my background, out of missions work, and I was working on the missions field. I know they're specifically out on the missions field, working, doing missions work, and then made a just heart and passion. We're helping churches locally, whether Africa, Europe, Asia, Central, South America, had the honor of helping the local church go into those nations. We'd work with the local church, help them communicate and just reach people in their culture for Christ and really helping the churches grow. And little did I know in all those years of missions evangelism that it would set the stage for the honor to be involved with Pro Media Fire, Pro Web Fire, and what we're doing today as a team. It was neat. We went through the time in 2008 in the financial crisis. I had made the decision of investing with some friends and really got involved in some real estate investments. Worst decision of my life, lost everything financially. My wife and I were actually wiped out at rock bottom. We had lost everything. We were living with friends, come off the missions field. And out of that season, as God just brought us out and healed our hearts and brought us out of that season, and miraculously our marriage is doing better today. When we came out, Pastor George, the neat thing is we began sharing our story in some churches, and we began to see that the church was no longer communicating the language of culture. We began to see this in the U.S. as we traveled, came out. So not only did God bring us through this season, but we realized as we came out, there was a need. All those years of missions work, we had the honor to start with the team, Pro Media Fire, Pro Web Fire, and the heart of reaching this generation really for Christ. And so as we launched out with Pro Media Fire, Pro Web Fire, we had a heart for digital. We began working with churches and not just their branding. I know that as Chase mentioned, all of it coming across the board. One great example was right off the bat, we had a pastor who was 54 years old. His church literally had failed, had fallen apart because it was no longer speaking the language of culture. He had come to us and he said, "Would you help us?" And we said, "Yes, we'll help you." And he launched a brand new church in the same city, the same pastor, and we began to change. We worked on his branding. We worked on all of the web, all of the digital, his front door. Then we began to work on all of the marketing, all the digital marketing. And we did it all from the Facebook to the Instagram to the YouTube, built it out. And the same man who had closed the doors of his church in upstate New York, this is not the Bible Belt, he had closed the doors of his church. He started now a new church. This is Rochester, New York. He started this church, and We launched it. This was years ago now on Easter. He launched it, the same pastor. And do you know, with all digital, he was blown out. The place only sat 400. The place was jam-packed, 2 overflow rooms. The parking lot was filled, turned people away, and we built the entire church with Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Now, this is way before the pandemic. This is years ago. We've seen it. So we've been so excited because we believe in it. We've been helping churches in the area of digital and ministries. And so this is our passion. So now in this moment, as the pandemic came, and in this right now, we looked at this as horrible what's taking place in the world. But from a gospel perspective, it's a huge opportunity. It's pushed the church into digital, and there's a digital outreach moment right now. If we really lift up our eyes and look on the fields and the harvest, we realize the fields are right. People are hurting. They're concerned about their jobs. They're concerned about finances, anxiety, sickness, all of these things, and we have the answer in Christ. So I've just been so excited. We've seen churches really thrive and grow digitally, Pastor George. It's been such an honor. We've been seeing some amazing things, and I don't know, we could get into some of the tactics. We could get into some of the things there specifically. You tell me what kind of you'd like me to speak into, Pastor George. We're just excited and passionate about this and reaching.
Let's do it. Appreciate your passion. Let's do it. Let's start with how you partner with churches with social media. We'll go across the board, but let's start with the social media component. What does your company do as it relates to it, and how would a church benefit from it?
And this is a great question, as you asked, Pastor George. One of the things we do first is we work with a creative framework, and really starting with who you are, the DNA of your church, your culture, and then next we work into who you want to reach. And this is so interesting because oftentimes we can get caught up in the church and imitating larger churches or those that we want to imitate. And we can learn always from church culture and what's taking place. But we found the most success is coming in and finding out who you are, what's your culture, what makes up who you are as a congregation, and then next, who do you want to reach? And the more you lean in on who you are and the more you bring that to social, that's what we do. We build a branding social guideline. We build and look specifically who you want to reach and build out all of the creative, our graphic designers, our art director, our creatives, our social media team. And we come in and help build out a strategy to reach who you want to reach. And the powerful thing is, and then we actually do full social media management. So we have all the graphic designers will create the social posts for you. We'll do the captions. And we actually manage and take care of your Facebook, your Instagram for you and help build out, which is a challenge for a lot of organizations as we've been pushed into this digital sphere right now, because there's a huge need for content. One of the things we all found is when the church went digital, we realized not only were we not ready, but often many of us didn't have our teams positioned and digital teams in place. So one of the things we do is we bring a complete digital team for a fraction of the cost of a staff hire. So rather than just hiring one individual who's a professional, you can get an entire team. You can get social media experts, graphic designers, video team, all of that working for your church and your ministry. So it's been really exciting as we come in, we'll build that out. And the strategy is custom to each ministry based on who you are and who you want to reach. And then we get the pleasure and the joy of building out, helping you reach those people for Christ. And it's been amazing to see the results. Right now, hearts are wide open. This is a huge opportunity for the church, Pastor George. We've just been honored to help churches in space.
Now you do video on that same scale, but talk about the website component. As we all know now, that is the front door to the church. It already had shifted to that. Chase talked about that earlier in his conversation at 28 times before someone came to visit. But now is infinities. They're not allowed to come to this. For most, some have opened up on other levels, but for most churches, especially in the African American community, because of us being a vulnerable population, we're yet still being virtual. Tell us a little bit about how you guys work together with the website building in that component as well.
Yes, we'll come in and on the website build, because it is your front door, which is amazing, as you mentioned. I love that, Pastor George, that Chase mentioned that too, with the 28 times. What a powerful statistic is that today we've found that that's a big key. It's the hub of everything you do digitally. and it's something very important. We have our Pro Web Fireside division where we do have our web developers. We come in and build out a custom digital journey for your people when they come in. Where do you want to take them to? You put all this effort into reaching them, but they're all going to touch your site before they walk through your doors. And now also churches are understanding the new norm is not only are they going to just walk through your doors, but now there's two pathways to the actual physical church and to your digital campus. There will be some that may only attend your digital campus or might not be in your area. So there's a huge transformation taking place within the church landscape there as a whole. But we'll come in and build out an entire custom digital solution, website, all of your web presence, all of your digital presence, and really look at your branding and who you are. Because we oftentimes will have clients come to us and they'll say, hey, can you work on our social, or can you work on our graphics over at the Pro Media Fire division? And the moment we begin to start looking at their brand, we realize the website is outdated. The website is old. And a great example to understand this is that I learned on the missions field is we could go down. When I was working, for instance, in Africa, I could go down the village and I could get up on the corner of the village and I could speak and just speak really loudly in English. But if you're there and they don't speak English, them in the Ivory Coast, and they're listening to me, they all speak French. So they're, what are you talking about? Who is this guy? And I'm speaking in English, a language they don't know. And that happens all the time in digital. This is a simple way to understand, because churches don't realize on their social and in their web, in seconds, there's a decision made about you and your church. It's done in literally seconds. How many times have you hit a website? You look at it, boom, on your phone, and boom, you just jump right off. You're like, oh, that's not what I was looking for. Oh, I don't feel welcome there. And that's what's happening with our churches in a moment, is that our creative and our design speaks a language, and it actually either opens up the language of culture and says, you're welcome in my church, in my digital space, or you are not welcome. It's for another generation, it's for an older generation, or it's outdated. And now, it used to be years ago, we thought that church, that, trends and all this stuff and keeping up was about being cool. It's not about being cool or on trend or super hip. It's actually about just speaking the language of culture, who you want to reach. And so your website is the foundation. Even if you reach someone on social, we found out if we drove them to your website, you're going to lose them. We can build a great social brand for you, but it must be consistent across all of your channels. So the same thing, and that's what they're looking for, that there's a consistency. Who you are on social is who you are when you hit the website to who you are when you show up at the door. That's why when you lean in on who you are and you speak the language of culture, you have the right to have a conversation. And one of the things with this pastor, as we had mentioned, which was so beautiful about him being at 54 years old, is that the younger generation is not concerned about your age. So your website, everything you are, is really leaning in so that you can have the conversation with them about Christ. And so the thing is, they're not going to listen. None of your people will share anything on social if it's not speaking the language of culture. Think about it. Okay, we'll kind of all take a great example. You get something from grandma, she shares it on Facebook, it shows up there and you're like, oh, that's great, it's grandma. But I'm not going to share that with my friends because that's grandma. That doesn't speak the language of my friends. They'll be like, Clint, what's wrong with you, man? What are you doing sharing that? And that's oftentimes the way a lot of the generation, the people we want to reach, that's the way they're looking at it. It's not speaking their language. So your website's vital. It is your front door those 28 times. It needs to be the same brand, opening up the conversation, showing you're welcome, communicating with them, and walking them on a digital path. So that's what we do. We create a digital path to those journeys. If you want them to show up in the actual physical church building, if you want them to show up on your campus, what are those journeys? Who do you want to reach? Where are we taking them? How do we get them to Christ? And we believe that digital will reach them, but relationship will keep them. Relationship with Christ and relationship with your community, whether digitally or online. So it says a little bit about what we do, Pastor George.
Well, tell everybody where we can find you. Tell everybody how they get connected, any promos, anything you want to do. Certainly the floor is yours, my brother.
Oh, man, sounds good. We would be honored if there's anyone out there and you would like to just really speak to us and how we could help and serve your church in the area of digital, whether it is you need creative help on your social over here with your branding, or you need help on the website and web development, creation, digital marketing, digital outreach. you can go to promediafire.com. At the top, you can click on there for church growth, promediafire.com. Check out and just fill out a quick little form, and we'll do a free digital strategy meeting with you. We'd love to chat with you and just help you and really help you in the area of outreach and how you can reach people in this moment. Also, you can go to our sister company, prowebfire.com, if you would also like to check out as far as on the website. But either way, feel free to come to promediafire.com and just reach out to us there, and we would love to chat with you and help you serve. And we do want to encourage every pastor out there. I know right now there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of things going on in this moment. We want to encourage you that right now is an amazing time to reach out. We're seeing clients of ours that we've been honored to work with, that their churches are growing, they are thriving and reaching people for Christ. And I would encourage you, even if you have just a little bit of budget and not a huge budget, please step out and focus on the digital. You'll see amazing results. There's people that need Christ, and we've got what they need. So we're cheering all of you on. We wish everyone out there, man, go for it. Let's go reach this generation and really dive in the area of digital. This is an exciting time to reach people for Christ like never before. Thanks, Pastor George, for having us on today. We are
Thanks, Clint.
with you. We love Hurt for Hurting.
Thanks, Clint. Appreciate you. We have the next special guest coming up here. I want to bring him in. Certainly, Clint, if you can stick around, we're going to do some crosstalk in a moment here. If not, we understand. Thanks again, brother. Like I said, we got special guests. Most of you would know him as the prolific pastor and preacher that he is. But certainly, even as I am diving into Richard Allen's biography, I see how the preacher historically and present day has never been confined and restricted to one area. The reason why many of us have a sense of financial stability is because of diversity of resources and professionalism that we dive into, and one that is the creme of the creme, an example of that, and relevant in this conversation of church and technology that we want to especially highlight today is Dr. William Curtis. He is the proud and faithful pastor of the Mount Arac Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And he has taken time out of his extremely busy schedule and extremely productive golf time. But he's also celebrating life. And we praise God. Another year of ministry. That's anniversary, right? Another year of ministry. My apologies. Another year of ministry. And so in the midst of all that, he wanted to jump on. I wanted him to jump on. He agreed to be about this conversation, to highlight his platform, his business and services that he offers to the church, especially during this time of pandemic. And we all have been forced to go and be virtual at this point. Some has chosen to open. It is not for me to judge or decide or determine the right or wrong of that. All I can say is that as the leading of myself and so many others, especially with the African-American population being vulnerable to COVID-19, distinctly than others. And so these are the resources that are here for you. I want first to begin, because he's a mentor, friend, and brother beloved, I want to first begin by just asking him how he's doing today and how's the celebration earlier.
It's pandemic life. So 23 years celebrating pastor anniversary. Everything is well. I mean, no complaints. Churches staying together, trying to keep content as king, make sure the congregation has a sense of connectivity, and just transferring everything we can over to a digital and virtual platform. So happy to be on today too, and blessed by the previous presenter.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Dr. Curtis. Tell us a little bit about your journey into your business, and tell us about it after you've given us the journey.
So I was a computer teenager. My first job was at a healthcare facility entitled United Healthcare in Baltimore, where I started out as a computer operator, and I ran the third shift and did backups for medical scripts that would have to be fulfilled the entire next day. And the owner, Mr. Gene Blum, challenged me at that time, at age 16, I believe it was, to think about a career in computers, and I was. I went to Morgan State University and signed on to major in computer science. And between my freshman and sophomore year, I acknowledged my call to ministry, and I changed my major to religion and philosophy and graduated from there. went on staff at New Psalmist, and my first assignment was to switch their entire computer system from Windows-based to Mac. So that was back in the days when Mac was in its infancy, and
Yeah.
we made that transition. I stayed on staff there for 4 years and then assumed my first pastorate at Shiloh in York. At that point, I kind of fell away from the whole technology world and spent 7 years there. When I got to Pittsburgh in 1997, close to 2002, I was praying for multiple streams of income. And I don't know who I read. I cannot remember the author, but I remember the author talking about that you probably have giftedness in you that is laying dormant while you're doing something else. And for me, that sparked for me the whole idea of computers and technology again. So I was praying that something would open up in the technology field. At the same time, my now partner was praying for someone who could seed into a dream she had to provide back then web development, website development for churches across the world. Kind of a mystical exchange. She woke up one morning having never heard me, did not know my name. The name William Curtis fell upon her spirit. She looked me up, found out that I was in fact in the city, got in her car, drove to the church. I never took walk-ins at that point. All appointments were scheduled. My secretary came in and said, I know you don't take walk-ins. And I cut her off and said, I know whoever is out there, I'm supposed to start a business with them. Melissa walked in and we took a yellow manila pad and sketched out what has become the Church Online. So since 2002, we've been operating. Part of the impetus for that was I felt like everything I was paying another company to do that was bringing me nothing but restrictions and no's. I just couldn't understand why they were telling me something couldn't be done. I knew creatively it could be done. I had a background in computers and technology, and I knew that it was probably more the case that their employment load and their client demand was probably preventing them from giving me the space for my creative imagination. So I then operated with a certain ethic. Everything that I wanted to do that I was hiring another company to do, I wanted our company to be able to do it and to offer to pastors the flexibility of creative imagination that is offered to corporate 500 companies. And because they have the financial platforms to be able to make these things happen, and churches are often operating, particularly African-American churches, on shoestring budgets, I wanted to give them that creative, imaginative space. So we started a boutique company that we call Church Online, and that has blossomed into video streaming and website development and mobile apps and video production and social media management and book publishing. And we tell pastors when they call us, if you can imagine it and it is a possibility for us to do, then we're going to find a way to do it, because we want pastors, one, to own their intellectual property, and we want them to have the flexibility of being able to infuse and synergize technology with what they're doing in ministry. So that's kind of how it got started. And we service well over 600 churches across the world, and very proud of what we represent as a company.
Wow, that's amazing. Tell us a little bit about how your company has been ministering uniquely to people during this pandemic.
It's interesting because 10 years ago, I was doing lectures on platforms where pastors were gathering, where they would lightly write me off when I was telling them, we are headed towards a day when you're going to have to figure out how to do ministry exclusively in virtual space. And that includes everything from how ministries function, flow, and operate, how we create spaces of fellowship, how we learn to minister to each other, how we evangelize in virtual space. And lo and behold, we had no idea that we would be hit with a pandemic that would literally force all churches to find how to create an identity and how to extend ministry to their congregations and to the world, for that matter, through digital and virtual space. The difference and distinction is that when you're trying to do this with a platform that brings excellence to it, there's time involved. The pandemic didn't give us any time. Second week in March, we were all in our pulpits. We were hearing about COVID-19, and the week later, doors were closed. So the company has been very busy, one, servicing our existing clientele and creating more space and responding to the additional needs that they have relative to how they minister to their congregations. And then two, trying to help other churches who we would call quote unquote late adopters now get enough quality of platform to survive the pandemic, and then, you know, act on how they've become converted to what needs to happen in virtual space. The spikes and surges are revealing to us that we're probably going to rest here for quite some time. And the fact that we're going to be here for quite some time, we need to be very creative and very intentional about how we want to minister to our congregations in this space. Every platform out there is overloaded right now, trying to provide space and quality and clarity and access, ease of access, so that pastors can minister to their congregations and congregations can have cross-pollination, so that, you know, gifts are for the benefit of the body, right? So we want to continue to benefit the body, and we have to do that right now in digital and virtual space. Funerals, weddings, counseling, fellowships, ministry meetings, all of the staff meetings, all of those things that are taking place now virtually. And we've been overloaded like everybody else, just trying to make sure we keep all of our clientele accessible in digital space. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun watching people who wanted some services but didn't want the whole suite. And now they're calling back saying, now I understand why you were saying website and digital app. Now I'm understanding why you wanted to have some congruence between electronic giving and fusing that into your website development and making sure that that's synergized with what you're doing for streaming every week. So now all things are kind of working out. And I think that's why the Bible says, write the vision and make it plain. And the interesting interpretation of the text says, so that you can run with it. So that now you see it in front of you, you want to run as fast as you can towards it, because there are so many ministry offerings out there right now in virtual space. The menu and the plethora of opportunities are out there all across the globe. So if you want to find a niche and create some uniqueness, you've got to get out there very quick and figure out where your particular specific gifting is in that area, and then maximize that gifting.
Wow. You have a unique perspective as a pastor. Can you, if you will, speak to the pastor that is struggling with making that jump from a budgetary standpoint? And both you and I know that oftentimes a person is pastor in name and not actually in function. And how would you advise them? And I think there's a little bend during this time, but there may be some still dealing with the struggle from their leadership, from their board, from their trustees, or sometimes not to be trusted, on how to motivate those that are around them, or even that pastor, to make that financial investment and not try to pitch pennies, to make sure that excellency and presentation is taking place.
So I'll answer it on two platforms. One is start with where you are and start with what you have. Start with what you know your budgetary constraints are. There are ways to make sure that you are connecting in digital and virtual space that is not as heavy in terms of monetization as you might think. So if you've got to use a Facebook Live, if you've got to use Zoom, I mean, you want to do those. But if you want to protect your content, I've been on Zoom streams preaching where they've been invaded by computer hackers. So if you want to protect that kind of space, you've got to also make the investment. And there's a author, Todd Bozinger, who has written a book, Canoeing the Mountain, and he has a line in it that I just, every time I'm talking about digital platforms, I keep reminding pastors and congregations. His line that has become so prophetic, and I'm sure you already know it: the world in front of you is nothing like the world behind you. So whatever investment you are making today to survive pandemic times, these are going to be the platforms we're going to be using with more frequency. It's almost going to become the norm later on. I've been so pleasantly surprised, Pastor Hurt, by the number of people who are not only getting saved, not only joining church, not only becoming connected to ministries, not only seeking fellowship in virtual space, but I've been very surprised at how many members have said, whether vaccine or not, I'm a more faithful member to Mount Ararat because I have connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So the person who wouldn't join a choir, who would not join an usher board, who would not join an outreach ministry, because they get off at 6 o'clock and the outreach ministry is meeting at 6:15 and they have to travel an hour to get there. Well, now they're able to still participate in the ministry and only make the trek over to the church when it's time to do the actual outreach project. It has been wonderful for galvanizing our congregation to get involved in ministry, and our numbers are just going up and up and up every week. The other thing that has been a pleasant surprise is the number of people who are hungry for content.
Yeah.
And I would say to any pastor, use whatever you have within your budgetary constraints, and remember, content is king. So be faithful to your content until you can add the layers of quality to it. And if you have to piecemeal it, do it. And help members to understand that while the medium may have to be adjusted, it is really all about the message. Because trust me when I tell you, if Jesus was present physically in 2020, he would have a greater net in virtual space as he's scattering seed to call people into the kingdom of God, into a life in the kingdom of God. So you want your leaders and officers and members to understand that this is all a way to be the kingdom. And if we believe that God gave to us these creative gifts, even if portions of these platforms have been used for evil, we also know that God created everything so that God's people can exercise in a field of domain, right? To have dominion over creation, which means everything that is available to us is a resource that can be used to evangelize lost people for the kingdom of God.
Wow, that's very helpful, tremendously helpful, as you always are. I want to bring everyone in here. Many of these services, they cross intersection, but I want to have a dialogue because all of you are consistent in your approach, and it's not the consistency is not selling, and this is what I appreciate about this group. It's not selling the services. Is selling the need of the services and knowing that these services come with a cost. And I think that's the struggle that a lot of, if we're being honest, church leaders to wrap their mind around because they just see one without the other. So Ed is the video component. We talked to him at the beginning. Chase is the giving platform of Vision 2. And then with Profire, I'm going to start with Ed. Out of all the conversations you heard, what stood out to you? And then remind us again of how we can find you in your services.
Yeah, definitely. Great panel you've put together here. Great versatility. And I hear many, like if you took this whole group, your church is set because you've handled it from the content side, the branding side. And again, I know that some people get weird about that word, but that's what it is, finding your identity and getting it out. And taking that and letting the church community know that this is a time of reset. And you have an opportunity to improve on what you've been doing, start something you may not have been doing, to help push the gospel forward. This is a technological era. More people have smartphones than they do have TVs worldwide. And so this is really a good opportunity to take advantages of these services and to move forward. Because again, like the gentleman said, you're preparing for the future. You're preparing for now and for the future, because nothing that happened before is moving forward. We are moving forward ahead with a whole new way of doing church. We're dealing with millennials that have already started in this digital space, and mainly church has been accessible through the digital space for them. And so now it's time for the rest of the group to catch up if we're going to continue to preach to the masses.
Thanks a lot, Chase.
Yeah, I've been kind of jotting notes down as everybody's been speaking. And the one thing that, actually there was two things, but I'll just, for the sake of time, just stick to one. Clint, the one thing that you mentioned about the website and how finicky people are, you know, if somebody visits a website, they've got a split-second decision on whether they're going to move forward or not. Think about that and how it relates to, or how it compares to an in-person experience. So if you walk into church and you sit down and pastor starts talking, how many people stand up and leave in the first 5 minutes? Very, very rare. So with the online experience, people have that flexibility and freedom to make split-second decisions like that. So the gist of what I'm saying is that it's all about trust. People trust your church. People may or may not, depending on their culture or their generational stances, may or may not trust the technology that your church uses. So the better you can blend the technology that you use to make it look and feel like it's part of your church and that people can trust it and use it so that it's, you know, enhancing their experience with the church and helping draw them in closer to God, you're all better for it.
Thanks a lot, Chase. Clint, same question.
I think one thought I would leave with everyone watching at this point, I've enjoyed each one. I'm just sharing really specifically to help the church in digital, is to leave another thought with everyone watching, is that we're in a Netflix blockbuster moment as a church. We're there and it's happened so quickly. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they don't know anything about Blockbuster. Like, Dad, you went into a video store and you picked out a movie? Like, yes, we did. I see, as well as everything I've heard, those that have spoken over the next decade, this is a transformational moment for the church. Those that lean in on digital, despite what you can invest. I love what Dr. Curtis said there, is that, you know, just start where you're at. If you don't have any funds at all today, you can't allocate, or your board won't allow that, then just start with what you've got on your smartphone. Start building out some real content, be transparent, start loving and sharing and show people that you care. And the finances you do have, you need to start making it as a priority within your church budget moving forward. But now's the moment. We can knock on the doors of everyone in your area on their cell phones and tell them about Jesus. I also love, Dr. Curtis, how you said if Jesus was here, he'd be out sowing seeds. So that's the thought I really think about, is let's get out sowing seeds. Let's use the technology in this moment, and let's step out and go in this moment and reach more people for Christ right now that are hurting. We've got a huge opportunity and hearts are wide open. Let's go into all the world and let's use digital to do it.
Bless you, brother. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Clint. Thanks, Chase. I'm going to stay with Dr. Curtis a little bit while longer and pick his brain on some ministry stuff, because it'll be just silly of me to have this mind on here and not for a minute, in light of everything that's going on, hear his perspective. And I hope that those that are listening will reach out to either Church Visions, either the Church Online, either Pro Media Fire, either Vision 2, where it fits in, where it fits your budget, where it fits your need, where it fits your adequacy, not just to build them up, and certainly we want to do that, but to build up God's kingdom. God bless you, brothers.
God bless you.
Be blessed, guys.
George, you as well.
Go ahead. Dr. Curtis, you got the floor. You were saying something?
No, I was just saying goodbye to the guys.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I got you here. Like I said, certainly we want to highlight this conversation about the Church of Technology. So let me manipulate a way to pick your brain on church. And as we deal with technology and as we see things taking place and the role that media plays in it, how have you been assessing the nation just in general in light of the political chaos, the civil unrest, protests, and COVID-19, and how that's been made out of a political issue? Just talk to us about those things for a moment, if you will.
So I've been using, I heard Ed use the term reset. I've been using the term, and I agree with that, but I've been using the term disruption. Because the difference to me is a reset makes me think that there will be vestiges of the old that might be salvageable. Disruption makes me think that there is going to be a new platform, whether we're talking how we do church, whether we're talking technology, whether we're talking politics, whether we're talking sexuality, whether we're talking race relations. I don't care what area you're talking about. We are in a disruptive season. And disruption mandates that we discern where God is speaking to us in the midst of the disruption and where the centrality of Christ rests in that disruption. And so I have a couple of diverging paths that come off of that. Could we have been more in control of this pandemic months ago? Yes. But the failure of governmental leadership to stand up to what, and I'll borrow the words of scripture, to he who does not do what is right in the sight of the Lord. The Bible only responds to that in a couple ways: famine, bondage, desolation, desecration. There's no way to stave that off, because if vision flows from the head down and what we're hearing from the top down is not in the best interest of the health of the country, the crucial conversations that need to be had around race, this loosing of bold white supremacy, there's only one of those ways that it can eventuate. You add to that the fact that you and I know we've been talking for years about what happens to empires. All empires reach an expiration date. And it happens because pride goes before a fall, right? So we are in the midst of such disruption where if we're seeking God, this is not about returning to anything. It's about how does everything around us need to look different moving forward. Can you imagine the political landscape can never look the same? Not after Donald Trump, not after seeing appointment of 200 judges to lifetime appointments. What that's going to mean for decisions that have been made from the civil rights movement moving forward, and how many of those progressions are going to fall victim to the attempts to scale them back, because we have a nucleus of people who really do believe that everything other than whiteness as defined by supremacists is the only legitimate presence in the United States of America. And I vegged out one weekend on James Baldwin, and I just listened to every available lecture I could get my hands on. And the line he has in there that convicts me that if he were alive today, it would be just as salient today as it was when he said it. You can't destroy us, you can't annihilate us, and you can't ignore us. So you're going to have to figure out a way to work with us. And that's about how I feel now. You're going to have to figure out a way to work with us. I'm not going anywhere, and you can't annihilate me. So if we don't do that, it's going to be to the peril of the whole country, right? And then our relationship with nations around the world. If I fuse that with technology, using that same word disruption, it's the same thing. We are never going back to church only, shoulder to shoulder presence in square footage ever again. Your ministry footprint is now going to include who you reach in virtual space. And I'll give you a quick testimony. Just this morning, my communications director texted me and said, and this was her confession, I never thought we could be as effective in this space as we were in square footage. But we had a girl watching us this past weekend for our broadcast who inboxed on the website saying she was suicidal. We promised always at the end of our services that within 24 hours, if you give us information within 24 hours or less, you're going to hear from one of the leaders of our congregation, and whatever your needs are, we're going to try to meet those needs. One of our leaders called, discerned that she needed counseling. We were able to virtually connect her to the leader of our counseling ministry. Counseling ministry was able to immediately connect her to a counselor. And a week later, her second testimony was, thank God for the ministry of Mount Arrow.
Wow.
Not a member of our church,
Wow.
but that's ministry. And it all took place virtually. You couldn't have been more effective if a person was standing right in front of you. We're not going back. People have ease of access and ease of connectivity. And I think it was Clint who was talking about when people pass your site has to be attractive enough and it has to have content enough to keep their attention, because there's just so much out there that's begging for their attention. So, it's kind of my soft answer to that. I'm sorely disappointed that I cannot see my congregation. I have not seen my members since the third week in March. And I'm disappointed that part of what is preventing me from seeing them is that we have such frailty, weakness, dishonesty, lack of integrity, immorality in our president and in our government officials. Nobody wants to stand up to him to say, you cannot tell people that 90% of COVID infections mean nothing. They're just going to pay. You can't tell people that.
99%.
You can't tell educators that they're mandated to start school in August and September, or you're going to withhold federal funds. It's irresponsible. It's immoral. And I'm so enraged that we are in a space and time where even trying to speak truth to power has to be rational and reasonable. The theological quandary is, what happens when you're trying to speak truth to power and power is mentally fragile, cannot understand what is rational or revelatory? It just keeps us in this holding pattern. And I don't know when, I don't know if, and I'm stretching it now to say, I don't know if we're coming out of this anytime soon.
Right. I would have to consent. What have you been thinking? I've been kind of out of my mental stability the last couple of days, a sense of internal frustration with the killings that took place over the 4th of July weekend, 6 of those being 14 and under, a mother driving with her daughter, child playing with their cousin, another child running into the house to pick up a charger for their mother. And I see a level of imbalance, and I'm asking this question for help, not judgmental. I see a level of imbalance in our reaction to, as it should be. I'm not one of those talking heads that try to twist the narrative. What about black on black crime? Mm-hmm. But what I am saying is that same energy and that same frustration needs to be from things that happen internally, even though we know it comes from a systemic economic depravity, housing, education lack, and things of that nature. What is it that we can do more than to create the noise, but make the strategic efforts to change that? The killings that take place, that some of us, I would admit, even myself, has even come at some levels desensitized to.
So I'm the eternal optimist, George. So I switched from the anger and the rage and the protest. I've switched from that to, God, help us to overplay our hand until all we have left is you. And what I mean by that is, I felt like George Floyd's death and the galvanizing of white and black and Latino, anger and frustration and their want to see better. I think it was a tipping point. Mm-hmm. Post that tipping point, the things that are happening, I think, have the awareness of people. They have the ear and heart of people in a way that prior to George Floyd, that was not possible. So my prayer literally has been help, because the enemy always overplays. And my hope, my prayer, my discernment is things are being so overplayed. The president is, he's so pushing this white supremacy motif that I want America to choke on it.
Mm.
Because only in the choking of it do they become desperate enough to find breath.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what my hope has been, because you're right. Normally, 2 weeks after any national disaster, things are back to normal. Everybody goes back to their respective playgrounds. This time it's been a little different. And I know in my city, I have more white brothers who are in pastoral ministry who are calling. And the questions are different this time. The questions are not, how can we come alongside you and help you? Can we donate this or don't? No, I don't need that. But if you want to have a crucial conversation about how shocked you are that this has been our reality for centuries, I'm more than happy to help you to understand that what you're seeing is a microcosm of what we go through every single day. My daughter asked me over Father's Day weekend, we went out to play golf together as a gift. And she said, "You ever been stopped by the police?" Have I ever been stopped by the police?
Mm-hmm.
2-3 times every year, I'm stopped by the police. And it shocked her because it brought George Floyd and all the protests and marches that she's been participating in, it brought it closer to home, because now her African American dad has been stopped. And the only thing that separated me from not dying in some of those is the way I chose to handle it. It wasn't the racism, it wasn't the hatred, and it wasn't the want to do bodily harm. It was the way I handled it. And I said to her, I hope that the nation gets such an overdose of this that they get sick to their proverbial stomachs and decide we can't live like this. I did a post that I got ripped for, but I did it intentionally to be a conversation piece, and I did it intentionally to upset sides. I said,
Mm-hmm.
White America, what do we have to do to help you to overcome your racism? Hashtag, let us help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew on the African American side, I was going to get comments. Why should we help them? You know, we're the ones with neon neck. Because I agree with Freddie Haynes. The only people that can end racism is white people.
Mm.
We can't end it.
We didn't start it.
We didn't start it. We're not promoting it. So the only people that can end racism is white people. But you need my help, because you don't understand the pathos and the ethos and the pain and the discernment and the fear. You don't understand that I sweat if a police officer pulls me over. And I should have no reason to fear for my life, but I do. Particularly if I'm in a dark place, you know, coming home on a late night and I get pulled over and I'm in a secluded place. Yeah, I get scared, and I'm privileged. So I have to take my phone and call the chief of police and put it on speaker to make sure that things go the way they're supposed to go. But everybody doesn't have that opportunity, right? So I'm just hoping that we overdose on it, George, so that we get so sick of this. I hope the next election reflects that even those who believe that Donald Trump's want for white power and dominance and white privilege, I hope they are sick of the methodology and sick of the white supremacy, and understand that we are better having all in the common good, to borrow the words of scripture, having it all in the common good, and that all boats rise together as tide rises, right? So that's kind of my prayer and my hope. And I'm fatigued of having conversations that deal with peripheral matters, like you know, in who's going to wear what wording on a T-shirt on a sports team. You know, I want everybody to be respected for whatever you bring to the table, including the supremacists. Because I'd rather have the honest conversation with you, because I think conversion can be born out of the honest conversation than all of us turning our T-shirts inside out and hiding our true feelings with regard to each other. So I just want the crucial conversations, and I want to be able to have the fierce engagement that helps us not only to be heard, but to listen. I had a guy who said to me, it wasn't until George Floyd died. Now, I don't know where he's been before that, but it wasn't until George Floyd's death that he really began to understand, listening to some of the commentating that was taking place, that he really began to understand how different his world was from my world. And that's because every day he's leaving an exclusively white community, driving to downtown Pittsburgh to go into an exclusively white business, to fellowship with exclusively white clientele, and to hang out with exclusively white people. So he doesn't understand some of the same things that go on when I walk into a store and I'm dressed in sweats and I'm followed around by a security guard, or I go into a jewelry store and the white security guard is suspicious of why I'm in that level of a jewelry store. And having that conversation helped him to understand that my world is totally different. Even though you see me as a privileged person, my world is totally different than yours. And if you want to be my friend and you want to get to know me, you're going to have to step out of your world, step into my world, and not just ask me to hear you, but you got to listen to my description of what life is like on the African American side. I hope I'm answering your question, because I feel like I'm rambling.
No, you're not. You're answering that component, but I also was wondering, yes, your perspective on the black on black killings that happened over the weekend, and kind of defeating the narrative that we only speak out when Black Lives Matter, when it's police brutality, but we're silent on things of that nature.
Yeah, see, I don't know, but see, do you think we're silent, or do you think that we promote the protection of our community? So here's my struggle. I'll just say what my struggle is. My struggle is high visible media encounters and the conversations that follow make it appear as if these things are not part of our tribal conversation on a day-to-day basis. George Floyd's death, black on black crime, you're preaching it from your pulpit. I'm preaching it from my pulpit. Social advocates are talking about it all the time. We're talking about trying to create black wealth and eliminate poverty in the African American community. We're talking about how to stop being such predictable consumers and to think about legacy and wealth and setting up future generations. It seems to me that it doesn't get amplified, or it doesn't make content from the bullhorn until you have these tipping point moments. But it happens every day. We're having these conversations every single day. I don't know how well, I don't know how good we're doing at converting the masses. And part of that is because a poverty mentality is a very interesting thing. When all you have to look forward to is living on this deserted place, even that is homogeneity around you becomes enemy. And you start self-hating, and self-hate, when it's reflected in somebody else who looks like you, turns into hatred for another. And as a result of that, now you're fighting over a street corner and a drug house
that you don't own.
That you don't own, right? But you have nobody else to vent that anger to. You have nobody else to make a victim of that. And the images you see on TV, the lack of quality education, the absence of parental responsibility, a church community that is inundated with trying to keep mortgage paid and square footage filled, that doesn't want to deal with controversial issues, doesn't want to create an environment of accountability, doesn't want to lose members to a higher expectation of morality, continues to fester a self-hate in our community. And when you hate yourself, how in the world are you going to respect anybody else around? So I can see how we implode on ourselves, because I can't respect a George Hurt until I love a William Curtis. And only when I love me do I love who you are in your skin and who we are in the larger global community, and how we together need to fight against those who are trying to annihilate both of us based on the color of our skin.
Yeah, and I agree 110%. And not only do I agree it, I lived it. I grew up in Detroit in the heart of the crack epidemic. I guess for me, I still trying to wrestle through, honestly, how, you know, 6 children can die on a weekend, and the same voices, leaders, myself included, people standing on corners protesting, can be silent.
Yeah. Now, how much of that do
I
you
don't think
think? How much of that do you think can also be? And this is a term I'm going to make up. Can be suffering fatigue.
yeah, I think it is. I think is desensitized, it's suffering fatigue, but I think those of us that have a sense of awakening, at least I think for me, I had that realizing how deep it is, and just making I was on a Zoom this morning, going to have one tomorrow, on how we can help pay for the funerals for these 4 individuals, and pay for mental health counseling for their parents, and start a scholarship in the memory of their name. It's a small drip in the bucket, but the least say, if I'm going to put the same fervor and passion, I don't think that needs to stop. For
Right.
the George Floyd, for the Sterling Alston, the Trayvon Martin, so
Right.
many names it's hard even to comprehend. And I understand the psychology. I'm not the Candace Owens. I'm not Rush Limbaugh. I'm not one of these people trying to switch the narrative. I'm not one of these people that don't understand everything you just said about the psychology of self-hate, poor economic system, education system, poor housing, gentrification, all these factors that lead into it. I also want to be taking responsibility in the same passion to attack that and hold, because to the mother that was driving with her daughter that got shot and killed and had to hold that child, that mother is not going into the nuance of those distinctions.
Right.
She's saying the loss of a child for something senseless.
Right.
The same way the George Floyd family felt that way, the same way Breonna Taylor's family felt that way.
Right.
And they need that voice too. And if that voice means attacking at some level the individuals who look like me, who have the same plight as me, who I could have been if I reacted to my life realities that is caused by this supremacy system of America, starting over 400 years ago. It's deeper than even 1619 of the trade, even before that, and treatment of Native Americans, and just the normacy of having selective superiority to selective inferiority. I would like to see, I don't want to call names because I don't want to be vicious, but I'd just like to see some of the faces that are up front on that, using their platform as they should for that one thing, that at least either be new faces, you have to get the same energy from CNN, you get the same energy from the Facebook post. If I put a Facebook post of meet me on Zoom, I'm thinking about getting married, or meet me on Zoom, I don't like so-and-so, I want to talk about it, that would flood.
Right.
But if I put the same thing on, hey, these parents had to bury their child.
Yeah, I think some things are just tipping points, man. I can't. It's a mystery to me how you could have a George Floyd and the globe respond, and you can have somebody. The Antoine Rose in my city was shot in the back by a police officer. Had just been on the force. That week was his first week, but he had a jacket of bad behavior leading up to his being hired for that position. And Antoine Rose didn't engender that same tipping point. I can't understand why God lets some things be a tipping point that awakens the masses, and other things seem to pass us so easily. I don't undervalue what I'm calling this suffering fatigue, this protest fatigue. I think people put so much energy in a season. I think it's Lance Watson who talks about life is based on rhythm and rest, and that it could be that the country is in this Selah moment and calming down from all that has taken place with George Floyd, that everything, unfortunately, that happens for a while until the next tipping point kind of gets missed. I don't know. And I feel what you're saying, that every senseless death, no matter the hands at what perpetrator, deserves the same amount of attention and advocacy and discussion and confession and repentance that was engendered by something that might have happened prior to that. But you and I are also students of history, and we know how many leaders get assassinated literally or in character. And you can, one can make the whole world stand still and the next can fly right on by. You know, I just, it's the mystery. And that's one of those, it's one of those things I did ponder why, you know, I can think of Ferguson and was a tipping point, but then Baltimore was a moderate tipping point. Didn't engender the same discussion, didn't bring the same national civil rights leaders to the city. Same issue, just didn't do it. Some pastors hook on to certain issues that are taking place. We could talk, if we wanted to be very transparent, about, you know, some are more high profile opportunities than others. Some are in places that people factor could advance their ministries that they may not think could take place in other spaces. I have absolutely no answer for that. That's one of those things that bewilders me, and it's going to be in the category of mystery, because we know there's going to be somebody who's going to die over this weekend in the African American community at the hands of another African American. We know it's going to happen across the country, and it's not going to engender the same tipping point, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it does start with that admission, that simple admission, and I think, you know, things can be a great awakening. I think if there could be a great awakening for other things, there could be a great awakening for this. I don't know how to make that happen.
I think that might be why some people were, I can only imagine that some people probably thought, I didn't give up my seat on the bus either, but the civil rights movement wasn't started on me not giving my seat up. Why was it started on Rosa Parks? You know? It just happened to be a tipping point, and it happened at the same time as a young Martin Luther King.
Yeah, Ida B. Wells did the same thing.
Absolutely. So it's one of those things. But I feel the same sense of frustration that some of our more highly visible prophets make an appearance occasionally, but don't always stay as consistent fighting these things that are happening every single day. And that's why I started out by saying, however, I don't know too many Black pastors who are doing incredible work who are not hitting these issues in the places where they have influence. Yeah. They just don't make national news.
Oh yeah, that's part of it, but there are some that you and I know that has internally national platform.
Absolutely.
That they rather talk about Trump taxes and whatever Trump does, which I think is the foolish genius of him, is that he knows how to push people button to distract them from bigger issues. I think Bill Clinton also perfected that. I think inherently great politicians perfect that.
Great leaders. Great leaders.
Yeah, yeah. So the very thing that you ought to be talking about, they'll dangle something beforehand, or he'll say something that he knows that's going, or tweak something that he knows that's going to infuriate people. At the same time, the actual legitimate things that's there's to talk about, you know, do what you want to do with the monuments. They're already built, but can we get African American history instilled into our educational system curriculum?
And can we go back and fight the fact that 200 judicial appointments have been made in this administration that will affect law and policy for generations?
Yeah.
So while we need to fight Confederate symbols and images, We need to fight the handling of COVID-19, but there has to be a deeper level of thinking and strategy. And here's what I will say that is a sore spot for me. I do think that if we were transparent as a community, an African American community, we are grossly reactive.
Yes.
But we are not aggressively strategic.
Yes.
So you ask most African American leaders on any platform, what are we doing collectively to advance our causes for the next 20 years? I'm not sure you can get the same answer. You said 1 year?
It's no, not one. It's no, not one. That's we have not, and that's been trained in us to not
Absolutely.
Because in a plantation, when there's 8 slaves to 1, you have to train the slaves to be, suspicious of one another.
Absolutely.
And so every time someone comes out, well, is who's doing this, who's doing that? I will say this: George Floyd had 2 nationally televised funerals. Would it have been wise to at least somebody else have a voice at one of those funerals?
Absolutely.
Not, but if the process ain't thought that way, the family asked me, the same family that trusts you to go up there, we see this in IC3 all the time. We see where you would know who would be in charge of such and such and such and such,
right.
Because that disposition and model. I remember something that stood out to me that I've never really mentioned, but it just stood out to me when Dr. West and they went into their new facilities, Church of White Walls on Queenston campus. At that, I flew down for that service, and he didn't say anything until the end.
Right.
To the very end, and that was for like 2 to 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The whole service was like everybody else talking.
Right.
That doesn't take away this authority, his impact, his influence to make that happen. None of us would be in that building if it wasn't for him.
But you and I know that those environments are fostered on the nurturing of relationships, not position, not power, not title. And
I think the person.
If we were to be theological, that's why the Bible is a book of building community.
Mm-hmm.
And being responsible to each other for relationship, because it's hard for us to even get together and strategize a collective social protest program if there is no relationship, because then the very first question is who's in charge and who gets credit and who gets the mic and who gets to go on CNN. The beauty of an IC3 and several other platforms is one of the reasons anybody can go to the mic is because everybody trusts everybody who is in leadership. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's a commonality because of the relationships. Different ways of doing things. I mean, the personalities are so distinct, different ways of doing things, but there's a trust because of the nurturing of relationship. And I think that also has to happen. And here's the other thing I would add to this. And I get kickback from this.
Mm-hmm.
What we're always after, consensus and unanimity. Is that the word? Unanimity?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think creativity is born out of unanimity.
Right.
I think creativity is born out of agitation and chaos and conflict and confrontation. So I give you an example. For the organization I'm a part of, that Bishop Thomas is presiding prelate KCP, we have a newsletter in which we put recommended reading. So I said to our administrator, I want you to put on there a article that I found by Cornel West, who is very critical of former President Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm.
And his premise is that part of the reason we are seeing the arrogance of Donald Trump is because President Obama did not push the envelope as much as he could when he had the opportunity to. Some things he could have sealed that would not even have been vulnerable for attack.
Mm-hmm.
Some things he could have promoted that the African American community could have been advanced by.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not offended by that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think out of that comes strategies for the next.
Mm-hmm.
But oh my God, there are people, I'll never read Cornel West again, because for them, the only thing that mattered is that he was being critical of another African American. Well, doggone it, if we can't be critical of each other, how do we then challenge each other for the collective good? Right? So, and we dance around our conversations so politely these days that everybody is always looking for the consensus and nobody wants to be the disruptor. Nobody wants to say what's going to overturn the apple cart, but also could lose creative imagination. So I'm a proponent for having the crucial conversations. I practice this as a pastor. I don't just want to talk to the people who love me. I want to talk to the people who are loyal to their membership but don't like their pastor.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you why. And more often than not, what we discover is you had a different perception of what I said or a decision I made, maybe because you're operating as a non-pastor in your assessment, maybe because I wasn't clear in the way I communicated it, maybe because to people with your personality type, I should have shaped it another way to make it more palatable. And it has helped me to be a better communicator.
Mm-hmm.
If I only talk to the people who love me dearly and every sermon is the best sermon they've ever heard and every program, oh my God, it just radically transformed my life, then the church remains, it remains in a place where we could be walking around with an infection. It doesn't necessitate amputation, but it certainly restricts movement.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think we need to do that on a national scale as well, so that we can come back and say we need to have an African American strategy, an African American agenda that you know all if most if not all buy into, that we can work towards.
Yeah, and I think 2 or 3 common denominator things. I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with economics. I don't think anybody disagree with education. I don't think anybody disagree with housing
or police reform. You know,
I think you probably would get some pushback with police reform. But I think if you handle those other 3 things in a way that was, and the reason why I say I think you'll get pushback from police reform, because you got so many that I had to be careful of when everything first broke out. Even in our church, you have so many African Americans that are served on the police force and military. That some who are, you know, conscious of the system, but others who have bought into it, or others in the middle, which most are probably in the middle of that reality. And I think that becomes a more difficult conversation. It's a needed conversation. Is a definitely, you know, it needs to be a reimagining of police. There needs to be a concept of, do we need a person with a gun giving us tickets? Do we need a person with a gun coming by to tell us some things that are a little bit more simpler, that security guard, mental health expert, same thing they do with parking enforcement, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Does the right, for the most part, parking tickets.
We got a lot of buffers.
They should.
You know, the other thing, George, that I keep asking leaders with whom I have personal relationship with, that I think is a question that we have to ask. Can you hear me?
Layers of conversation I have with that. But as it relates to the economy, there may be layers on how to get
I think we think we lost the connection.
But we do know that gap needs to be filled. I would add health care to that as well. Healthcare, we know it needs to be filled. We know loans, education in society. You have those cases.
Yeah, the other thing, can you hear me pretty clear now? Can you hear me pretty clear now? Okay, so the other thing that I think is critical, George, is, and I've been asking leaders this with every conversation I'm privileged to engage. What does a win look like? What does a win look like? And until we can clearly define what a win looks like, all we're doing is reacting to things that are taking place in the interval segments of life. What does a win look like? What does healthy coexistence in the United States of America, what does healthy coexistence one with another in the African American community, what does it look like that would define a win? Until you can put words to that, everything else is reactionary.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And I confess, I've not heard a lot. Freddie Haynes has his trilogy of pillars, reparations that he's calling disaster relief money, education, and then he adds as that third, police reform. I agree with you on the police reform thing. I do believe that there needs to be the discussion of, however you term it, there needs to be the discussion of reparations of some sort, shaped some kind of way. And there needs to be a total overhaul of education in order for us to do what we need to do for legacy for the next generation. Then the follow-up to that is, okay, how do we shape that? And what kind of investment is going to be needed? And how do we fund that moving forward? Until we have conversations that go beyond the reactionary, I just don't think that there'll be a lot of progress. My hope is that the things that are taking place now will force us into asking the real hard question. What is the win? What does victory look like? We know the enemy. We know what we're fighting. How will we know when we've won?
No, if it's a basketball game, doesn't have quarters and nobody kicking, scoring points, I mean, you're just up, running up and down the court all day.
Absolutely. And the wonderful thing about Michael Jordan's documentary was it was very, very clear for him. You're playing the season to get ready for the playoffs. The goal was the playoffs. From day one, the goal is the playoffs.
Right. What was his name again? What was that guy's name again? Oh, okay. I think I heard of him.
Pat Riley used to do the same thing with the Los Angeles Lakers. Every time we go into a city, he would say, if it's a 3-game stretch, we want to make sure we take 2 of them. If you leave every city taking the majority of the games, your record will be at a place where you'll have home court advantage going throughout the playoffs. It was a strategy. Now, ask African-American leaders, what does education, what does good quality education for the African-American in an urban setting look like?
Right.
You may not know that answer. What does wealth building look like for us?
Right.
May not have those same answers. I got to jump off, get ready for prayer calls.
I understand. I understand. Sorry for holding you so long.
No, man, I enjoy these, and I would love to do it at intervals and just pick one topic and just peel back the layers of it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. You got time to pray for us real quick?
Absolutely.
Before you get out of here. And then last final question. Who do you think Biden should choose as his running mate?
That's a good question. I'm a stay out of that one right now, George.
Okay, that's fair.
Stay out of that one right now. This is one of those things where there are things about him having been vice president and being, you know, that one step away from the Oval Office, that I honestly want to give him the benefit of the doubt that as me being a pastor, there are certain decisions I make that only my anointing can understand.
Gotcha.
You follow what I'm saying?
I do. I do.
And what it takes to do politics in the United States of America, I would love for it to be an African American female. I would love for it to be an African American female. And that's as far as I'll push that envelope right now and see how we do leading towards September.
Absolutely. Pray for us.
Yeah, let's pray. Lord, thank you for George and for his willingness to open himself and his platform for crucial conversations and for his want to push us to think on these things. And I pray that you continue to be a hedge of protection around his life and continue to enlarge his territory and widen his influence and help all of us to continue to benefit from his leadership. Now, bless us as we seek to stand in the gap and to do ministry work in a way that not only brings you glory, but advances the quality of life for your people. Bless us the balance of this day, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, bro.
George, thank you, man.